You've noticed it, haven't you? The things that used to excite you no longer do. The people you once needed feel distant now. The dreams you chased with such urgency have gone quiet in your chest. And you're afraid. Not because you've lost something, but because you're losing interest. And losing interest feels like dying while you're still alive. But what if it isn't death? What if it's the opposite? What if the slow withdrawal from everything you thought you wanted is the first honest breath you've taken in years? Kierkegaard understood this terror. He called it despair, but not the kind you think. Not the dramatic collapse. The despair he wrote about is quieter. It's the despair of living a life that isn't yours, of wanting what others want, of being who others need you to be. And one day, without warning, your soul simply stops cooperating. It refuses to pretend anymore. And that refusal, that's where you begin. Kierkegaard spent his entire life writing about one thing, the self. Not the self you show the world. Not the self that smiles in photographs or answers questions at dinner parties. The self that exists when no one is watching. The self that wakes up at 3 in the morning and asks, is this really my life? He believed that most people never meet that self. They live in what he called the crowd. They adopt the values, desires, and identities handed to them. They become successful. They become liked. They become everything except themselves. And they do this because becoming yourself is terrifying. It requires you to stand alone, to choose, to be responsible for the shape of your own soul. And so we avoid it. We stay busy. We stay distracted. We stay interested in things that don't matter. So we never have to face the one thing that does. The question of who we actually are beneath all the noise. But then something shifts, slowly, quietly. You stop caring about the promotion. The party invitation feels like a burden. The relationship that once felt necessary now feels like a costume you're tired of wearing. And everyone around you thinks you're depressed. They think you're giving up, but you're not. You're waking up. You're losing interest in the false self. And that loss is the most honest thing that's ever happened to you. Let me tell you what's really happening. You've been living in what Kierkegaard called the aesthetic stage. It's the stage where life is about pleasure, distraction, novelty. You chase experiences. You collect moments. You try to feel alive by constantly seeking something new. A new job, a new city, a new lover, a new version of yourself that finally feels right. But it never does it? Because the aesthetic life is always running. It's always looking outside itself for meaning. And eventually, you get tired. Not physically tired, soul tired. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. The kind that comes from pretending that external things can fill an internal void. And so you lose interest. Not because you're broken, but because your soul knows the truth before your mind does. It knows that nothing out there will ever complete you. No achievement, no person, no perfect life. The aesthetic stage is a beautiful cage, and losing interest is how you finally see the bars. But here's where it gets harder. Because once you stop running toward things, you have to face what you've been running from. Yourself, the real one. The one who doesn't know what they want. The one who's afraid of freedom. The one who realizes that if nothing external can save you, then you're responsible for your own existence. And that responsibility is crushing. Kierkegaard knew this. He called it anxiety. But again, not the anxiety of worry or stress. The anxiety of possibility. The dizziness of freedom. When you realize that your life is not predetermined, that you are not your job title, or your relationship status, or your accumulated accomplishments. You feel unmoored. You feel like you're standing at the edge of an infinite abyss. And every choice you make carves your identity out of nothing. Most people can't bear it, so they retreat. They go back to the distractions. They convince themselves they were just going through a phase. They reinvest in the things they lost interest in, forcing enthusiasm, faking passion, anything to avoid the terrifying openness of their own freedom. But some people don't go back. Some people stay in the discomfort. They sit with the loss of interest. They let the old self fall away, even though they don't know what will replace it. And those people, they're the ones who begin the real work of becoming. There's a story Kierkegaard tells, though not explicitly. It's a story I've felt in my own life. Maybe you felt it too. Imagine you're at a gathering. Everyone is talking, laughing, performing their social selves with ease. And you're there, but you're not there. You're watching yourself from somewhere behind your own eyes. You're saying the right things, smiling at the right moments, but inside, there's a voice asking, why am I here? Why does none of this feel real? You leave early. You tell them you're tired, but you're not tired. You're something else, something you don't have a word for yet. You walk home alone. The night is quiet. The streets are empty. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, you feel something close to relief. Not happiness, relief, because you've stopped pretending for a moment. You've stopped being interested in things that require you to perform a self you don't recognize. And in that walk, in that silence, you feel a faint outline of who you actually are. Not who you should be, not who you were, but who you are right now, in this moment, stripped of expectation and audience. That's the turning point. That's where losing interest becomes transformation. But transformation is not gentle. Kierkegaard was honest about this. He wrote about the sickness unto death, which is the despair of not wanting to be yourself. It's the despair of realizing that you've been living a borrowed life, and now you have to take it back. And taking it back means letting people down. It means disappointing the version of you they loved. It means being misunderstood. It means standing in your truth, even when your truth makes no sense to anyone else. You will lose people. You will lose opportunities. You will lose the comfort of fitting in. And for a while, it will feel like you're losing everything. But what you're actually losing is the false ground you've been standing on. The ground built on others' expectations. The ground that required you to betray yourself daily just to feel secure. And yes, it's terrifying to watch that ground crack and fall away. But beneath it is something solid, something real, yourself. Not the idea of yourself, not the potential version or the past version. The actual, irreducible, limited, flawed, human version of you. And that version doesn't need to be interesting to anyone else. It only needs to be true. Here's what Kierkegaard understood, that most people don't. Becoming yourself is not about finding your passion or discovering your purpose. It's about accepting your existence exactly as it is. It's about standing in the anxiety of your freedom and choosing anyway. Not because the choice is right, but because it's yours. He wrote about the leap of faith, not religious faith necessarily, though he spoke of that too, but the faith required to commit to your own existence without guarantee, to live authentically, even though you don't know if it will lead anywhere. to stop waiting for permission or clarity or certainty, and to simply say, this is who I am. This is what I choose. I may be wrong, but it's mine. That leap is what happens after you lose interest, after the distractions fall away, after you've sat in the uncomfortable silence long enough to hear your own voice beneath all the others. And that voice, it's quieter than you thought. It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand. It simply says, I'm still here. I've always been here. And I'm tired of being ignored. So you stop ignoring it. You start making choices that reflect it, even if they don't make sense on paper. Even if they disappoint people. Even if they make you look lost, or selfish, or foolish. Because the alternative is worse. The alternative is spending your entire life interested in a story someone else wrote. The alternative is arriving at the end and realizing you never showed up for your own existence. Kierkegaard believed that the highest task of a human being is to become a self before God, to stand in radical honesty before the infinite and say, this is me, not a better version, not a future version. This version, with all its limits and failures and contradictions. And that task begins when you stop performing, when you stop chasing, when you lose interest in everything that asks you to be anyone other than who you are. People will call it depression. They'll say you've changed. They'll try to fix you or save you or bring back the old you. Let them, but don't believe them. Because what's happening isn't an ending. It's a beginning, the beginning of your actual life. You're not losing yourself. You're finding yourself beneath the rubble of who you thought you were supposed to be. And yes, it's lonely. God, it's lonely. Because authenticity is not a group activity. It's something you do alone, in the dark, with no applause. It's the choice you make when no one is watching, and no one will ever know. But that loneliness is not emptiness. It's spaciousness. It's the room you've cleared for yourself to finally exist. Kierkegaard spent much of his life alone, misunderstood, writing books that few people read while he was alive. And yet, he wrote with such urgency, such passion, because he knew that the question of selfhood was the only question that mattered. Everything else, career, love, success, comfort, was secondary to the primary task of becoming who you are. And he knew that task required loss. The loss of illusions, the loss of false securities, the loss of interest in anything that distracts you from the confrontation with your own existence. So if you're losing interest, don't panic. Don't rush to fill the void. Don't go back to the distractions just to feel normal again. Sit in it. Let the old desires fall away. Let the false self crumble. Feel the anxiety of your freedom and don't run from it, because on the other side of that loss is something you've been searching for your entire life. Not happiness, not peace, but presence. The ability to be here in your life as yourself without apology. And that presence is worth every single thing you lose along the way. Losing interest isn't the end of your story. It's the first honest chapter. The chapter where you stop reading someone else's script and start writing your own. And your story, it doesn't have to be grand. It doesn't have to inspire anyone. It just has to be yours. That's enough. That's everything.